Hi, this is Tanawan. Today my friend and I are going to explain about Lab 4 Part 2. We are going to explain 3 tasks, which are 1. Message content abstraction, 2. Clustering message, and 3. Automation. Let's first talk about the message content abstraction. In this task, we created getVector function that take preprocessed data frame as the input and use doc2vec library to convert post into vector. Here we are using vector size as 20 and 50 epochs to train the model. After we trained the model, we use the model to convert all poses into vectors and then we store it into additional column in data frame.
Now let's take a look at the clustering vectors function. This function takes the data frame that contains all the information of the post along with the vectors corresponding to each post. Now we use a k-means algorithm with number of clusters 5 and random state 42 to perform the clustering, and we also store the cluster number corresponding to each post in the cluster column of the data frame and return the data frame. We also get the cluster centers of the k-means clustering and return them.
Now let's talk about the task 3 automation. For this task, we defined a function called database pre-processing storing periodically function. We are giving intervals in minutes as the argument, and here we are executing the while loop, which will allow us to perform the task repeatedly, and then we are connecting it to the database so that we can update it. And here we are taking the input from the user. We will give user 3 options. The first one is to get the data and update the database. If user chooses the first option, we will ask the user to enter the number of posts to fetch. So in that, once we get the number of posts, we will execute the fetch to data frame, preprocessed data, get vector, clustering vectors functions. Whatever output we got from those functions, we will store it in the database. And once we get them, we are going to give a scatter plot which contains messages of the clusters and keywords, and uh, at the end we are using the method called time.sleep just to allow the database to update after certain interval that user given. So this option we are implementing task 1 and task 2. So if the user chooses option 2, which is to find the closest cluster, here first we are trying to take the input from the user. To User can enter either keyword or message for which the user wants to know the closest cluster. And we are also getting the information data, whatever we store in the database from the SQL. Um, and then we are trying to execute the function called find closest cluster function. Now let's see what find closest cluster is doing. So in the find closest cluster, we are trying to clean the user input, and by using the doc2vec model which we trained earlier, we are trying to find the user vectors. Once we get the user vectors, we are trying to find the centers of each cluster, and we are trying to find the cosine similarity between the user vector and the centroids. And finally, we are trying to get the index of the maximum similarity cluster, and we are returning that closest cluster index and user vector. So, and then we are printing the whatever messages we found in the cluster which is closest to the message in the terminal, and we are also giving a graphical representation in terms of in the format of scatter plot, which will have the messages and keywords related to the cluster, which is similar to the message which the user given. And finally, we have the option 3, which is to exit the program. Now let's see the file createdatabase.py. Here we are using PyMySQL in order to create a database. First, we are trying to connect with the local SQL server using username and password. And we are creating a database named Lab4 Part 2. Once we are creating a table named posts, in with which we have fields like user ID, timestamp, post, URL, image text, keywords, post image text, vectors, cluster, where we defined user ID and timestamp as primary key. And also, once we created the database, we are printing the statement called database and tables created successfully. Okay, now let's run the program and see. So first I want to create the database. In order to do that, I'm executing the create database.py file. Okay, we can see the message that database and tables are created successfully. Now let's see that in the MySQL. So we have named our database as lab4 part 2. Okay, sorry, I have given the wrong lab name. It's lab4 part 2, not lab3 part 2. Okay, now the database has been changed. Okay, let's see the tables in this database. Whether we can, okay, we can see that the post table has been created successfully. Now let's see what's in the post table. So these are the fields which I have defined in the post table. Okay, let's see whether the post table is empty or not. Okay, we can see that it is an empty set right now. So let's go back to the terminal. Now let's try to run the main script and see. So in order to run the main script, we have to give the command along with the Python and main script.py. We have to also give the time interval for which time the database will update. Like if we give 1 minute, the database will update after each 1 minute. If we give 5 minutes, it will update every 5 minutes. For simplicity, I'm giving 1 minute time interval for now. Okay, it is giving me the option to choose a number to perform the following operations. Let's see what are the operations. First one is to get the data and update the database. And second one is to find the closest cluster. And third one is to quit. Now I want to fetch the data because and update the database because I don't have any data in the database. So I'm choosing the option as 1. Okay, it is asking me to enter the number of rows to fetch. I want to fetch 100 for simplicity. Okay, it is also giving me the message that it is fetching the data, which is good. We can see that the data is in progress. So here in this step, we are also fetching the data, pre-processing the data, and we are dividing the we are extracting the keyword from the data, and we are dividing them into the clusters. So this is a visualization. You can see these are the cluster vectors, and you can see that if we hover to the points, we can see the message and the keywords. And you can also observe one more thing, that these points have different color. So every cluster is differentiated by a color. So each cluster will have a color. So let's go back to the program. Okay. If you go back to the program, we can see that the data we have updated the database, and the database updated successfully. So we got these messages. So it will take 1 minute time in order to give the options again, because as I mentioned earlier, we are giving the time interval in order to update the database. So it will take that 1 minute time, whatever we gave, to update the database again. Meanwhile, let's check the database whether it is updated or not. Okay, we can see that the database has been updated. We can see that it has URLs, it has vectors, it has messages, it has keywords, and it will also have a cluster number. And we can see that the 100 posts have been updated in the MySQL table. Okay, 1 minute has been passed, so it's giving me the again option to choose the number. This time let's find the closest cluster. Okay, if you choose the option 2, it is asking me to enter either keywords or message. Let's give a message and see. I'm just giving a random message. It is giving us a scatter plot again. Here we can see that only few messages have been posted. These are the messages which are in a particular cluster which is near to the message which we have given. So these are the closest messages. Let's go back to the terminal, and we can see that even in the terminal we are printing the list of the messages in that cluster. Okay, let's close the plot. Let's go back. Okay. Now it is again asking me to choose the number. So these process will go on. Like we can add any number of posts. We can update the database periodically, and also we can find the closest cluster when we are not doing that. And until we choose the option quit, the program will run any number of times. So for now, let's choose option 3 to quit. So we can see even the message that exiting the program. Thank you.